At the beginning of the movie, we learn that a woman named Vera is a prisoner in the house of the main character, whose name is Robert Ledgard. Robert turns out to be a plastic surgeon who wants to develop an artificial skin resistant to burns and able to protect against insect bites. One evening, Robert is at a medical conference and encourages other scientists to join him in his research. After the meeting, Robert returns home and analyzes an animal blood sample he took from the hospital on the way. Shortly afterward, Robert goes to his room and watches Vera on a screen next to his bed. After watching her for a while, he goes to check on her. Upon entering her room, he is shocked to find that she has tried to commit suicide. He immediately sends her to his laboratory and bandages her wounds. Upon regaining consciousness, Vera asks him how long it will last, but the doctor doesn't answer. This reveals that Robert has been holding her captive for years to experiment on her. Robert lives in an isolated villa with his maid Marilia and several servants. It is shown that Marilia knows about the doctor's research and Vera's captivity. In fact, Marilia has been looking after the mansion for quite some time. During breakfast, Marilia hands a man a gallon of blood, informing him that it was extracted from a live animal. Robert takes the blood to his laboratory and conducts experiments on it. In his lab, he keeps many insects and various blood samples for his research. He then extracts the artificial skin and carefully applies it to a headless mannequin. He then transplants the skin to the model and eventually transplants it to Vera. After numerous tests, he concludes that the skin is resistant to mosquitoes and fire. In the next scene, Robert attends another conference where he announces that he has successfully grown a burn and insect-resistant artificial skin called gall. He also says that his invention will help eradicate malaria completely. He also adds that the experiment succeeded on a laboratory mouse and promises that it will work on humans as well. After the presentation, the chief scientist asks about the name gall and his method of obtaining skin, to which Robert replies that it is the name of his late wife, who was badly burned. Robert also tells the scientist that he has combined pig cell genes with human cells to make the skin harder and more resistant to mosquitoes, although this practice is illegal. Upon hearing these words, the chief scientist immediately orders him to stop his research and threatens to report him to the commission if he doesn't stop doing it. Later that evening, Robert returns home and goes to the monitor to watch Vera. He then goes into her room and informs her that he has finished experimenting on her. Knowing there is no more work, Vera asks him about her future, but the doctor remains silent. Then she suggests that he marry her and live together, which horrifies him, and he immediately leaves the cell. Later, Marilia advises Ledgard to get rid of Vera as soon as possible, as she believes that Vera's resemblance to his late wife could create complications in the future. However, Robert tells her that he is in no hurry and asks her to dismiss all the servants in order to hide Vera longer. The next day, when the servants leave, a man in a tiger costume appears at the gate. He tells Marilia that it is her son, Zeka, whom she has not seen for 10 years. The distraught woman lets him into the house and offers him something to eat. However, while Zeka is eating, the news of a bank robbery is broadcast on TV. From the news, Marilia learns that Zeka is one of the escaped robbers. When Marilia asks him about it, he confesses everything and accuses his colleague of not turning off the security camera. He then convinces Marilia to let him stay for a few days. At this time, Zeka sees Vera on the surveillance camera and is surprised by her beauty. He asks his mother where Vera is, but she refuses to say anything. After her mother refuses to reveal Vera's whereabouts, he ties her to a chair and begins searching for her on his own. Eventually, he finds her room and begins forcing himself on her. In the process, however, Zeka says he is surprised to see her alive. It turns out that Vera looks a lot like the doctor's late wife, Gala, and he doesn't understand why she resists. At that moment, Robert arrives at the mansion and finds Marilia tied to a chair and Zeka and Vera on a screen where he is doing bad things to her. Enraged, he runs into the room, shoots Zeku, and takes Vera in his arms. After some time cleaning the bloody bed, Marilia tells Vera that Zeka and Robert were brothers, although no one knew it. She adds that Zeka's father was a work colleague, and Robert was born to Mr. Ledgard, who she used to work for. This means that she is Dr. Ledgard's biological mother, though he has no idea. Afterward, Vera asks Marilia why Zeka acted like he knew her. Marilia replies that he mistook her for Ledgard's wife, Gala, who looked a lot like her. Marilia goes on to say that her sons had very different childhoods. Robert grew up in a privileged family and became a doctor, while Zeka grew up a criminal on the streets. She also says that Robert and Gala had a daughter named Norma, and the family was happy. However, Everything changed one day when Zeka came to their home and Marilia allowed him to stay. When Zeka met Gala, they immediately fell in love with each other. They ran away from home in a car, but midway through they had an accident. Zeka ran out of the car, leaving Gula in the burning car. By the time Robert found her, she was barely alive, and her face was disfigured. Robert took care of her day and night. He even removed all the mirrors from the house so she couldn't look at herself. As time went on, she recovered, but her face could never be restored. One day, Gula went out to see her daughter playing in the yard. However, she accidentally saw her face in the window pane, which finally destroyed her hope for life. In an instant, she jumped from a great height and crashed. Her body fell in front of Norma, traumatizing her for life. Marilia then tells that Norma could not bear such a tragedy and died as well. Later that night, Vera and Robert make love. However, Vera claims that that man caused her real pain, so the doctor stops the session. They snuggle up to each other and soon fall asleep. In his dream, Dr. Ledgard dreams of his daughter's death. In the next scene, the movie goes back 6 years, where Norma is recovering from the trauma of her mother's death. One night, Robert and Norma attend a crowded party, and shortly afterward, she mysteriously disappears. Robert goes in search of her, and at that moment, a guy rushing about his business drives past him. He later finds Norma lying unconscious near a tree. When Robert wakes Norma up, she screams that the guy abused her. Robert then wakes up covered in sweat. At the same time, Vera dreams of a guy named Vicente, who works in his mother's store. Vicente is in love with Christina, who also works at the same store. But it turns out she is more into girls. He then attends the very party that Robert saw in his dream. After a while, Norma and Vicente meet at the party and start to get along, and they go out with Vicente's friends. Once inside the garden, they start to make love. During this, Norma has an anxiety attack and screams. She bites his hands when he tries to stop her, and then he slaps her in the face, making her unconscious. Vicente rides away on his motorcycle, leaving her in the state in which Robert found her. A week after the incident, Vicente goes for a walk on his motorcycle, but is soon pursued by Robert, who is looking for revenge. In pursuit of him, Robert crashes into Vicente's motorcycle and kidnaps him to his basement storage room, where he keeps him chained there. The policeman then informs Vicente's mother that they found her son's wrecked motorcycle on a cliff. He adds that Vicente may have fallen off the cliff and been washed away by the sea. However, his mother refuses to believe this and insists that her son is alive. The next day, Robert goes to the psychiatric hospital to check on his daughter Norma, but she refuses to recognize that he is her father and closes herself in a closet. She has developed a fear of all men and only cooperates with the female nurses. Elsewhere, Robert tortures Vicente by keeping him chained and depriving him of food and water. One day, Robert goes into the basement, washes Vicente and gives him food, then moves him to a better place. A few days later, Norma passes away, and to distract himself from his grief, Robert tries to indulge in work. He prepares Vicente for his new experiment. He shaves him and takes him to the operating room. He also invites other doctors and creates a fake statement, agreeing to give Vicente a vaginoplasty. Here we learn that Robert plans to turn Vicente into a woman. The doctors successfully operate on him and turn him into a woman. After the operation, Vicente wakes up to find that he's no longer a man and instantly goes mad. Later, as Vicente examines himself in the mirror, Robert comes in and provides him with medical devices to enlarge his recently operated personal organ. Robert also examines him regularly and helps him make a full recovery. In the process, Robert reveals that he kidnapped Vicente because of his terrible behavior with his daughter. With no other choice, Vicente does whatever Robert says in the hope that one day he will let him go. As the years pass, Vicente becomes Vera. Vicente is the Vera we see from the beginning of the movie. In the next scene, Vicente tries to escape after recovering, but when Robert locks the house, she tries to kill herself. However, Robert immediately rushes into the lab with her and saves her. While stitching up the damage, he calls her Vera, saying that this will be her new name from now on. He then locks her in a special room where Vera spends time alone watching TV and doing yoga. Realizing the need for a caregiver, Robert invites Marilia, who left her job at the house 4 years ago. When she arrives on site, he asks her not to unlock the door and to call him if anything goes wrong. The movie brings us back to the present day, where Marilia is not happy with Vera wandering around the house. Robert even allows Vera to go shopping with Marilia. Marilia warns him of the bad consequences if he lets her go free, but he doesn't take her problems seriously. Later that day, the doctor's colleague comes to his house, to show him a newspaper with Vicente's picture on it. He recalls giving him a vaginoplasty and accuses him of lying to him about Vicente's consent. At this point, Vera comes out and defends Lager, saying that she consented to the surgery because she wanted to be a lady. The coworker leaves, and Robert expresses his gratitude to Vera for keeping him safe. Later that night, when they make love in bed, Vera comes downstairs and says she's brought lubricant. However, she seems to have other intentions. She takes a gun out of the drawer and puts it in her bag. Before going upstairs, she strokes a picture of her past when she was Vicente. When she arrives in the room, Faith points the gun at Ledgard, who is stunned by her unpredictable act. She then admits that she lied about falling in love with him and shoots him. Downstairs, Marilia hears a gunshot and runs to their room, but she suffers the same fate as Dr. Ledgard. The next day, Vera goes to her mother's boutique where she is met by Christina. Walking through the store, Vera tells her story in detail to Christina, who listens to her and bursts into tears. Vera then proves to Christina that she is Vicente by showing her a 6-year-old dress. The movie ends with Vera turning to her mother and saying that she is her son Vicente.